Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Rav Moshe Hauer Zatzal was a Talmud of Yeshivas Ner Yisrael. He was not a Talmud of our yeshiva, and it is therefore, somewhat curious that not only is it appropriate for us in our yeshiva to give Divrei Hesped for Rabbi Hauer Zatzal, but it's obvious that we need to give Divrei Hesped for Rabbi Hauer Zatzal. It's obvious that we in our yeshiva owe him not only a great deal of gratitude, but would gain so much if we study his life, his Torah, his contributions to Klal Yisrael, and do our best to model ourselves after the things that he stood for. Now, to be honest, I'm not really the person to be giving this hesped or to be sharing these words. Some of our Rashi Yeshiva were much, much closer with Rabbi Hauer Zatzal, and certainly some of our Rashi Yeshiva are big enough to understand more fully how great Rabbi Hauer was. This was kind of last minute to make sure that something is said on our first day of the Zman, that somebody speaks, and maybe if I did my job as well as Rabbi Hauer did his job, you would have had the opportunity to hear at this point from someone bigger. I'm sure over the course of the next little bit, you're going to hear from bigger people about Rabbi Hauer. I'm sure many of the Rebbeim are going to want to speak about him and share some of their reflections and their relationship with him. I'll share with you where my relationship with Rabbi Hauer started. It was pretty late on. My first introduction to Rabbi Hauer was when I was teaching in Lander College for Men. I was invited to a meeting at the OU where they were studying a survey that was done about religious commitment of teenagers. And does it track to be the same as their parents, not as much as their parents, more than their parents? And we were going through all of the data, and they invited a lot of important people. I think someone on the board of the OU was a big Turo person, so they had to have a representative. So they sent me, so I was the token, what do they call that? Affirmative action. I was the affirmative action guy. So it was all these big people, and I knew everybody in the room except for one. Meaning I knew the name of every single person in the room except for Rabbi Hauer. I never met him before. I had never seen him before. I had just come out with my first sefer. I was giving it to everybody that I knew. So I gave everyone except for Rabbi Hauer, and he's like, "Hey, what's going on?" So that was my first introduction to Rabbi Hauer. Wasn't much. He wasn't famous yet at that point. Those who knew, those who were really in the know, he was Baltimore famous. Meaning those who were in the know in the community. Those who were in the know in the community certainly knew who he was. And then my second introduction was right after Rabbi Hauer was named executive vice president of the OU. He did what he always did, which is to try to reach out to as many people as he possibly could, to be able to hear them out, to see what the needs were, to see what Klal Yisrael wanted and how he could be helpful to the Jewish people. So he got together a group of Rabbanim in the 5 towns, as he did in other communities as well, and he tried to meet with all of us to hear from us what the OU would be able to do. And that was my first glimpse of Rabbi Hauer as a personality. You know, you saw what his values are and how all he wanted to do was to be able to help. He never was about himself. It was always about the klal, and he always opened lines of communication. That was the way he did things. And then a short while later, I started asking around about him because I didn't know anything about him, and there was something very unusual in the business that I'm in. Nobody had a negative word to say about him. That's very, very rare. I remember I was in Yerushalayim a short time after that, and I spoke somewhere, and an older woman came over to me, and she said, "You must know my son Moshe." And I said, "Excuse me, who are you?" She said, "She's Rabbi Hauer's mother." I said, "Truth is, I don't really know him well, but if he's as good as everyone is saying he is, what a gift to Klal Yisrael his new position is going to be." And then COVID hit. And to a large degree, Rabbi Hauer was running the communal response for the Orthodox community to COVID, and there was a lot of time we spent together on Zooms with a lot of important rabbis, a lot of important doctors, Rashi Yeshiva, Rabbanim, and I watched him operate in a very, very high pressure kind of setting. And I was mostly quiet in those meetings, but watching him operate, that was special. And that's where I felt I started to really, really understand Rabbi Hauer and understand how he worked. And then after COVID, there were a few more points of connection. He asked me to come meet with him in his office, and we did, about a variety of initiatives. We had several conversations about always Torah initiatives, and how to be Marbitz Torah in a more effective way, how to get more people involved in learning. That was always at the forefront of his mind. And then October 7th, and the 2 years since October 7th, and the hostages, and the Chayalim, and the Pirud and Klal Yisrael. And then that took up I would say 90%, it took up 100%, 110% of his attention, of his heart, of his emotions. It really, really, really had an impact on him that never waned. It never, for most of us, over the course of time, you get used to a new reality and things aren't as sharp as they once were. For him, it never seemed to dull at all. So the P'tira of Rabbi Hauer, again, I'm speaking for me personally, it hit me very, very hard. I haven't had a decent night's sleep since, and that's very uncharacteristic for me. Normally, I have a trick of how to fall asleep. I put my head on the pillow. That's it. But since Shmini Atzeres, Mamish hit me very hard, and I was thinking that there are probably three reasons that that's the case. The first is just how sudden it was, and I started to think about the natural trajectory would be that he and I were going to become very close over the next couple of decades. It's just, people in administrative positions in yeshiva and people in administrative positions in the OU are naturally going to work together, and we're naturally going to spend a lot of time together. We would see each other a lot, and I was really looking forward to being able to learn from him. And for me, that's a tremendous loss of the next couple of decades of learning, of growing, of being able to see someone of that stature operate, being able to see how he manages all the different personalities and egos and sensitivities, and how he does everything l'shem shamayim. The second reason I think it hit particularly hard is that I don't think he's replaceable. Morein Rav Shachter Shlita often says that cemeteries are full of irreplaceable people. And everybody's replaceable in some way or another. But every once in a while, you have someone with such a mizug of midos, such a balance and a mixture of particular midos that you just can't think. I sat there racking my brains on Motzai Simchas Torah. Who else has these qualities? Has all of, I literally could not think of a single person. I know a lot of great people. I could not think of a single person that has this part. In a certain sense, he was a chad bedara on that level. And the third reason that it hit so hard is that I know that I wasn't so close with him, but he was a very hard person not to love. If you met him, you loved him. He was so humble. He was so soft-spoken. He was so encouraging of younger Rabbanim. I would say that I think he really genuinely liked me as well, but I also don't think that was unique. I think he really genuinely loved everybody. He was kind enough, he always made that extra call, that extra reach out. When last year we made a family simcha, when my son Zachariah got engaged, he made sure to call to tell me how much he loves the Holmline family, how close he is with Malcolm Holmline, because my daughter-in-law is a granddaughter of Malcolm Holmline. Always did the extra reach out, the extra call. But what I wanted to highlight today is 5 particular qualities of Rabbi Hauer, and we should again with every Hesped we should try to emulate as best as we can these qualities. So quality number 1 that I wanted to highlight is his incredible ahavas haTorah. A lot of times there in our world you have the Talmidei Chachamim and you have the administrators. Rabbi Hauer was a first-rate Talmid Chacham. He loved to learn. He was always learning. Every spare moment, he was always learning, and he was a genuine Talmid Chacham. You don't have to trust me. There are many of his shiurim that are still available online. There's a website with all of his shiurim. And you could just listen. He was in halacha, in hashkafa in particular. My friend Rabbi Isaac Rice told me that in recent years, Rabbi Rice started getting into teaching Maharal, and he said he doesn't teach a piece of Maharal without first hearing what Rabbi Hauer had to say on the Maharal. He had tremendous ability to make both Maharal and Ramchal Svarim that are not always so easy to bring down to earth and to make practical and to make relatable. He had a tremendous ability to make it practical and to make it relatable. Rabbi Hauer believed very strongly that the Torah has something to say about everything. He held, when he was a Rav in his shul in Baltimore for 26 years, he held that if there was something major going on in the world and the Rav didn't speak about it, that was ki'ilu, the Rav was saying that the Torah has nothing to say on it, and that's a chilul Hashem. And he always came up, he always had a way of showing what the Torah hashkafa is on whatever the issues were of the day, on whatever topic was on people's minds. His last Ni'ila drasha was this past year, was that after meeting so many hostage families, he said he realized that with all the debate, how much force should the IDF go in with, and is going to risk the life of hostages and this and that, all the discussion and all the strategy and everything else, he said you talk to a hostage family and there's no reasoning, there's no logic, they just want their child back. They just want their child back. And Rabbi Hauer said that before Ni'ila, that helped him understand what the Ribono Shalom wants from us. Everything else, all the how-to and what you're going to do and what's going to be, HaKadosh Baruch Hu just wants us back. He just wants his children back. Leaving everything aside, Ha'ava Mekalkelis Ashura, HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us, he just wants his children back. And that's the way Rabbi Hauer saw things. He saw the Torah as a reflection of the world, and the world as a reflection of the Torah. Everything is somehow tracked back to Avodas Hashem. So it was the same sugya. So that's point number one. His avas haTorah and his stature as a Talmud Chacham. Point number two is his avas Yisrael. His love for Klal Yisrael knew no limits, and he understood more practically and more poignantly than most of us how badly we need Achdus in Klal Yisrael. He understood where the tzaros really come from. That our enemies have the power that they have when they have it, only because we can't get together. But when we get together, we'll be much, much stronger against our enemies. This is something that he felt to his core. Rabbi Hauer once told the story of his own chasna. He grew up in Montreal, and he had his Afrav in Montreal, and he came back to Yeshiva to Ner Yisrael on the Sunday after his Afrav. He was getting married Monday night, and Rav Yaakov Weinberg, Zichron Levrach, the Rosh Yeshiva, who's Rabbi Hauer's Rebbe, was supposed to be Masar Kiddushin, and he called him into his office, and Rabbi Weinberg said to him that there was a scheduling mistake, that there was an outreach organization, I think based in Detroit, that had asked Rav Weinberg to speak for them, and he thought that was on a Tuesday night, and he had said yes, that he would speak for them. And he now realizes that it was a Monday night, the same night as Rabbi Hauer's wedding. So instead of Rabbi Weinberg saying what he was going to do, he said to Rabbi Hauer, so what do you think I should do? So this young chassan was just asked by his Rebbe, who he was looking forward to have as his Masar Kiddushin, what do you think I should do? Rabbi Hauer said, Rebbe, the reason you're supposed to be my Masar Kiddushin is because I'm a Talmud of yours. But it's a catch-22, because if I were to tell you to officiate at my wedding at the expense of something you could do good for the Jewish people, then it would just prove that I'm not a Talmud of yours. And Weinberg ended up not being Masar Kiddushin. And that was Rabbi Hauer, as a young person, he was able to see that. He gave himself to the Klal. Rabbi Hauer's brother-in-law is a friend of mine, Rabbi Avrami Farber. He said that Rabbi Hauer's father, when Rabbi Hauer was still a bacher, his father apparently was not an easy person to impress, and Avrami Farber joked that he spent his whole life trying to impress him, and it was not an easy, it was his shver, it was not an easy person to impress. And he said, as a bacher, his father said to him that my Maishi is an Adam Hashalem, that he had so completely perfected his midos. But he didn't only give himself to Klal Yisrael, he really gave himself to Reb Yisrael as well. Meaning it wasn't only about the big picture things. There were so many individuals that can tell you about how he went out of his way, like I said before, that extra call, that extra chavrusa, that extra meeting, that extra always making somebody feel like sometimes you talk to a person and you get the sense that they're looking for their next conversation, as they're talking to you, that they're not really. Rabbi Hauer was always focused on the person in front of him, and he always found the person that needed to be lifted up the most, and he did so. Rabbi Rose, who took over Rabbi Hauer in his shul, said that if you want to honor his memory, then you should notice somebody who can use chizik and try to lift that person up, and that would be the greatest honor to his memory. The third quality that I wanted to highlight is Rabbi Hauer's humility. He was so soft-spoken, Moreinu Rav Shachter Shlit, I asked Rav Shachter what I should say about Rabbi Hauer, and he said, Divrei chachamim benachas nishmai. That all the words were spoken benachas. He was so much so. Rabbi Silber from Baltimore said the first few times he met Rabbi Hauer, he thought that he had a hearing problem because he spoke so softly. There's chachma to that as well. You have to listen closely. You have to lean in and listen closely, and it felt important. Everything he said felt important because it usually was. However, he was not a pushover. I have been involved in situations where I saw people attacking Rabbi Hauer. They're not talking about this right now. But there were people that were not happy with the way he was doing this, that, or the other thing. And he never, ever took it personally. There was a group of people that came to essentially attack him. And he reached out to each of them afterwards individually. And he said, I felt that the conversation devolved into what it devolved into because it was a large group, but I feel that you have so much to offer me about how I can be better and what I could, but maybe it's better if we have this conversation one-on-one. Most of us would just dismiss the whole group. Who do they think they are? They walk into my office and tell me how to do my job. They weren't hired to do this job. I was hired to do this job. He wanted to hear what every single person had to say. He knew exactly who he was. He consulted with Gedolim regularly, but he didn't underestimate his own decision-making ability either. Humble people are very rarely so bold and so creative. Rav Ezra Neuberger had commented that Rabbi Hauer is the strongest person he ever met. And there's something to that, because it doesn't match the voice, but it matches perfectly. If you knew him, it matches perfectly. The fourth thing I wanted to highlight is how level-headed Rabbi Hauer was. As I mentioned before, my major introduction to how Rabbi Hauer operated in a communal setting was during the crazy times of COVID. It's hard for us to be yored back into that mindset of COVID, but it was certainly at the leadership level and at every other level also. Eventually, it was chaos. No one knew what the right thing to do was. We didn't have enough information. People were accusing each other of murder, of horrible things, and among communal leaders. And he's running these meetings with ice in his veins. Nothing rattled him. He never appeared rattled. He never appeared shaken up. He never once raised his voice. He never spoke over other people. He was able to see where other people saw black and white. He was always able to appreciate the gray. And that was true about people as well. When it came to appreciating people, he was never mevatel a person. Even if he disagreed with 98% of what a person stood for and what a person was about and what a person, he was never mevatel a person. He wasn't into shtick. He was an ish emes. There's a woman in my shul who was a giores. Actually, was Megayer 3 times. Kept on upgrading, but she was close to Rabbi Hauer, and about 20 years ago, when North Woodmere was starting but when my shul was starting, people didn't know what it was, like what kind of community is this? So there was a blog. There used to be a thing called blogs. There was a blog where someone said, well, what is it? Is it yeshivish? Is it modern? Is it chassidish? What is it? So someone had responded, it's JPF. And I'm familiar with MO, I'm familiar with FFB, I'm familiar with BT. What's JPF? So someone said, just plain from, no shtick, no, that's it. So this person in my shul told Rabbi Hauer, that we were labeled JPF, and he was so excited. He said, that's the greatest compliment you could have, that you just want to serve Hashem, that you don't have to fit into any box, that you don't have to, sign up to be, to have all of these shitos, because just being an Eved Hashem was the highest compliment. So remember, during COVID, I don't often do this, but maybe I should, because it's the kind of thing Rabbi Hauer would do. I reached out to him to tell him how glad I was that he was in the position of leadership that he was in. I didn't know him that well, but I realized almost immediately that this was someone very special and someone very unique. In fact, it came as a shock to me that he was only 12 years older than me, because he was way more than 12 years wiser than me. Rabbi Frand had said that the entire history of Yeshivas Ner Yisrael is worthwhile just to produce a single Rabbi Hauer. And you understand what he means by that. And a fifth element is that he just got it. He understood Klal Yisrael. He understood what was important, what wasn't important. He had a good read on people and personalities, on the issues. Moreno Rav Shechter had a tremendous trust of Rabbi Hauer, because he felt that he had such a good read of things. You can go back and read the emails. He used to send, a lot of times institutions send out emails before Shabbos with the Dvar Torah, and nobody reads the emails because you get a lot of emails and it always comes before Shabbos when you're busy, whatever. Go back, read the emails. Each one so profound. Each one hits the nail on the head. He understood. He thought about the world the way a Talmid Chacham should think about the world. And he could talk to anybody. He knew how to advocate for important, firm causes because he could talk to anybody. He could talk to a senator. He could talk to clergy of other religions. He could talk to Gedolei Yisrael. Anybody in between. So these are the 5 qualities that most struck me about Rabbi Hauer. And I just want to share with you a couple of things to think about going forward. 3 things to think about going forward. One thing to think about, or maybe not to think about, but it's been on my mind a little bit. Rabbi Rose mentioned in his drasha this past week in Baltimore that a lot of members of the Kehillah there had kashas, had questions for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Rabbi Rose said if he could formulate the question that he would want to ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he would formulate it like this. What exactly did the world have too much of that you felt that we didn't need Rabbi Hauer anymore? Was there too much achdus? Was there too much avas Yisrael? Was there too much compassion, too much chesed that we could afford to lose the symbol of all of those things? Meaning the qualities that he had, and this is the reason I think he's so irreplaceable. And I'm sure someone will take the position and mold it in their own way, and Rabbi Hauer would want it that way. But the qualities that he most had are the ones that are most needed right now in Klal Yisrael. The second thing, more than one person has said to me in the past few days, that it could be, we can't get into HaKadosh Baruch Hu's mind, so to speak, but it could be that Rabbi Hauer's shlichus was to shepherd us through COVID and the aftermath, and then October 7th and its aftermath. It could be that he fulfilled that shlichus, that he could return back to the Mishaleach and said, Asisu shluchusi. I did exactly what I was supposed to do. This past Shabbos in my shul, we had a simcha. And anyway, Shabbos is not a time for Hespedim. So what I decided to do to honor Rabbi Hauer is the way that he would want to be honored, not by talking about him, but by sharing some of his Torah. So I listened to a drasha that he had given on Parshas Bereshis. And what he said over a Ramban, that the pasuk says, it's a pasuk that's fluent in most of our mouths, Kivo shavas mikol malachto asher bara elokim la'asos. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Mekadesh the Yom HaShvi, and the Yom HaShvi was special because that's when he stopped all the malacha, asher bara elokim la'asos. And the Rishonim were all troubled. What is the word la'asos doing over there? Rashi has a fascinating suggestion that la'asos means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had a 7-day work plan, and he doubled up on day 6. so that he can have day 7 off. Whatever the messages of that are is worth thinking about. But the Ramban quotes in Ibn Ezra that la'asos means HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't just create the world and leave it. He created things and gave the Bria the capacity to regenerate. The Nivraim were able to become Borim. That which was created was able to create and perpetuate and advance beyond itself. And Rabbi Hauer said it's not just that it's able that you take an apple seed and you plant it in the ground and you get a new apple tree. It's not just that the Bria was able to generate more of the same. But in a certain sense, HaKadosh Baruch Hu left part of Bria to us. That he gave the Bria the ability to advance. And he had a number of Mamari Chazal, most notably the Gemara in Pesachim, that the price on Pesachim, that tells us, Rabbi Yossi says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to create, there are 2 things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was going to create during Shesh Simei HaMaaseh, but he waited and he left it for Adam Arishon to create on Motzai Shabbos. And one of them is fire, which is interesting because that's the first. The Or is the first thing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created, and the Ur, the fire, was the first thing that Adam created. We had other Mamari Chazal, I'm not going to get into right now. A beautiful medrash about Shlomo HaMelech completing the Bria by completing the Beis HaMikdash, Kol Malakta. But the point was that even HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided to leave some of the job to be done by us, for us to complete the job. The mitzvah of Milah, the medrash, Tanisrofas, Rabbi Akiva, HaKadosh Baruch Hu left it for us to do some of the job. And perhaps there's a mahu afata over here as well. That no matter how important a person is, no matter how great a person is, no matter how much a person was able to accomplish. One of Rabbi Hauer's children said it's like he lived his life on double speed. So instead of Me'ah Ve'esrin, he had 60 years because everything was going twice as fast and twice as much. By the way, it is very comforting to see his children speak about him. You get the sense that he was very successful in passing on. I don't know them, but you get that sense that he was very successful in passing on that Masorah. But no matter how much a person is able to accomplish, he leaves it for the next generation of rabbinic leaders, many of whom are probably sitting in this room right now, to be able to take those messages, to take those attitudes and that Torah Hashkafa, and carry it forward, and that ultimately would be the greatest bracha. You're going to see his impact is going to be felt for many years, even if we don't always know when we're experiencing it. Because even when he was here, his impact was felt in ways that we didn't know that it was even his impact, because he never drew attention to him. It was always about the Torah. It was always about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It was always about being an Eved Hashem. Yehi Zichro Baruch.